hello, and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you have sent me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com or have left for me in the comment section of my Q&A videos. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Critical Q&A show, or if you're a first-time viewer, welcome to my channel. I hope you hit that subscribe and bell button so that you get notified when new videos drop. Every Friday, Saturday, Sunday is my regular schedule, and I invite you to subscribe. So we answer questions here, but also we have a podcast, which posts on Saturdays. Yesterday, I did posted a podcast interview with Ian Rafalco, and I hope you all will check that out. We were a couple of Scientology kids growing up in Scientology households. What was that like? What kind of things did we experience and run across and run into? You guys have heard some things. We talk about more. So I hope you'll check that out. And I definitely plan on doing more interviews with Ian because we have a lot more to talk about as we went over in the podcast. And also, of course, we have our Critical Conversation show that I have to plug because every Friday night, my wife and I, sit here and do a call-in show where you all can call in and talk to us. And this week, we talked about some Scientology updates and stuff that had happened this last week. I got to watch a video of this wonderful OT Scientologist, Joy Gandela or something like that. Anyway, the postcard mania that you might have been hearing about in the news. This is being reported on Vice, and other media outlets are picking it up. It's totally gone viral. So y'all can check out that call-in show where we discuss some of that and talk about that. All right, now let's get on with your questions. Nick, during your time in the Sea Org, did you ever discuss aging with an older Sea Org member? Were older members concerned about what would happen to them once they no longer fall into the able-bodied category? I remember you mentioning that older Sea Org members eventually get assigned to lighter duties, but how do they feel about having to continue their service indefinitely? It's one thing to sign a billion-year contract at 14, but having to live with it into your 60s and beyond is rather different. Thank you for this question, Nick. It's certainly a good one, and the angle is definitely appreciated here because, yes, older senior citizen type Sea Org members, and that's specifically what we're talking about here is Sea Org members who are of age. The best word, first off, to start this, that I can think of to describe old Sea Org members is crotchety. And by that I mean, what makes someone crotchety? This adjective describes someone who is difficult, irritable, and ornery. If you're crotchety, you complain and argue and are more or less miserable to be around. And this is not something that I necessarily lay at the feet or, the responsibility given to those people. They're in an environment of authoritarian control where very few options are given to them. And they signed up when they were, all gung-ho and ready to save the world. But, there's something about getting older that you start realizing that maybe some of the decisions and choices and beliefs and ideas you had and made when you were younger were not necessarily the most well-informed, or not necessarily the wisest or smartest or most beneficial to you. And that you see that, some ideas that you used to cling to quite passionately and believe wholeheartedly, like you really thought if just everybody could just get this, everything would be wonderful, and you start thinking like that as a young person, a youngster. But you get older and you realize after you've been around, down the barn a few times and you've seen, kind of behind the curtains, and you see how things really work and how those hopes and dreams are really great and they really are inspiring, and they provide an awful lot of impetus for an awful lot of energy to be exerted in, an awful lot of directions. Rarely are those idealistic goals and dreams realized. Rarely are they actually achieved. And you come to learn that you are kind of a cog in the machine of society. no matter where you are in the world. I mean, I could be talking to a tribesman in Borneo, and the same thing still applies. You know, the dreams of youth and the idealism that we experience as young people fades with experience. And we see that our unrealistic expectations of how we were going to change the world and make everything different and make our stamp on history and all of that, doesn't always necessarily work out. We all can't be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or something like that. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. There's nothing, I'm not saying any of this stuff and as though there's something wrong with this. It's the natural order of things. Now, having said all of that is what comes to mind for me when I think about senior citizens in the Sea Org, because they are very rarely did they join as senior citizens. Some do, but most have been around for a very long time. And there are a couple of them I saw or knew, who really embraced the whole faux military environment of the Sea Org and really were into the order and the structure and the hierarchy and the, yes sir, no sir, and, very crisp, kind of old school, old sergeant, grizzled officer type guy. I ran into a couple of those, but for the most part, most of the people that I talked with, and I did go out of my way to talk to quite a few senior citizens who were in the Sea Org with me, because I was always interested in stories about L. Ron Hubbard, and some of those people had met with, worked with, interacted with L. Ron Hubbard, and I was always grilling them for details. But in doing so, of course, you would learn something about them and their lives, and of course, working with them, you learn some things as well. And I guess where I'm going with this is that I could now, looking back on it, I would not have thought about it in the same way when I was in the Sea Org. When I was there, I thought of these ornery, cranky, sort of temperamental people as more of a bother than a joy to be around, and something I really didn't want to do a whole lot of. And they were also slower, couldn't get as much done, complained about that. So as a young go-getter kind of Sea Org member, and I was in the Sea Org until I was about 42. So I was, full of energy for most of those 17 years that I was involved with it. I just kind of didn't really appreciate them as people. I looked at them more as impediments to getting the job done. And that's why, unfortunately, I was not alone in that. Many Sea Org members would openly or bitterly complain about, the older people who were in the Sea Org, not knowing really anything about their history, not knowing anything about them, just complaining because it was just something else to complain about that was safe to complain about. You couldn't complain about the things you really wanted to complain about. So, older people became easier targets. They were not targets. I want to be clear that this was really just kind of verbal complaining. I never once saw anybody use this kind of lack of affinity or distempered ideas or attitudes. I never saw this being used to openly justify or rationalize elder abuse or, beating up on them or hurting them or anything like that. If anything, it was the exact opposite. We were, really treated older people more with kid gloves when it came to the physicality of the Sea Org. And often there was a certain degree of even if it was, a little disgruntled, there was a degree of respect for the longevity, for the age, for the commitment, for the fact that sometimes in our more quiet moments, we knew that was going to be us someday. Because when you sign up, you really do believe you're doing a lifetime commitment. Most Sea Org members sign up with that idea. And so, of course, they're old in the Sea Org. Well, one day we're going to be too. And when it came to taking care of them or dealing with their needs, there was often an attitude of, we care for our own. We take care of these people. We're not going to just let them suffer, even though, the reality of life in the Sea Org and the reality of that culture is that money was often not allocated for them, and they were not often taken care of or looked after in the way they should have been. So while there was, good intent, that didn't necessarily always translate over into good action. Now, as far as, them being concerned about what would happen to them once they were no longer able-bodied, I mean, I saw some senior citizens, Sea Org members, complain about the work schedule, the fact they couldn't keep up, their bones were creaking, their muscles were hurting, they had arthritis and other issues. Pretty quickly, that kind of thing would result in a reduced schedule. So I didn't really see too many older Sea Org members really grossly dissatisfied or angry or upset with the scheduling or with the fact that they were going to go on a reduced schedule or that they couldn't get on one. Because often, there was also a point where these are people who have seen all the young whippersnappers come and go and come and go and come and go. So when some new fresh blood comes on the line and is like, oh, you people, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, they could kind of get away with, I mean, not openly, but they could kind of get away with the, okay, whatever kind of attitude towards those people. Because you do get to a point in your life, whether you're young or old, if, after enough abuse, where you're just kind of tired of it. You're just kind of, okay, here we go again, kind of thing. And while you might not, again, openly do that, to openly disrespect a young person with, full of themselves, they just wouldn't show up. I mean, if it was time to go get some work thing done and they weren't up for it and they just weren't there, and you go chase them down and it's like, hey man, I'm on a reduced schedule. No, you're not. That wasn't approved. Well, I ain't coming to work. I mean, that's just, I'm undressed. I'm too tired. I'm this, I'm that. And sometimes you could get away with that and sometimes you couldn't. I'm not saying that, just because they got ornery and cantankerous doesn't mean they always got away with it. But they would get away with it a hell of a lot more than any other demographic in the Sea Org. Okay. How do they feel about having to continue their service indefinitely? I think what I recall is that there was a lot of kind of apathy. There was a kind of a giving over to, well, this is my life now. Like once they realized that clear and OT and saving the planet and all that shit isn't really happening for them, or isn't really something that they're going to accomplish, or isn't really everything it was cracked up to be. Because that happens too. I met a lot of OT senior citizens, Sea Org members who'd gotten OT 20, 30 years ago. So what? Here they were still doing the grind, and the grind sucked. So, OT, schmoti, okay, that's nice, but I'm stuck here. And there's a point, I think, of realization for them where they realize that there is no outside world life for them anymore because they're not able to go get a job, raise a family, get support. They don't have any support system out there. And so they're kind of stuck in the Sea Org. And so this is the life. And here they are. Because they could get up and leave if they wanted to, but where would they go? What would they do? And so a sort of a resignation, about it, resigned to their circumstances, is more the attitude I saw with older people. If not, just depression, just ugh. And I saw a few of those, right? People who now I look back on and go, oh yeah, they were depressed, So I did see that. Yeah. So that's kind of this flavor of it, the what I observed of it, and I hope that gives some inside knowledge on what it's like to be an older person in the Sea Org and why they just kind of keep slogging it out, even though they might not necessarily even really still believe in much of any of it. They still believe in Scientology. That's the thing that they would still fall back on, is their sort of faith beliefs in the dogma of the technology of Scientology. It works, it's good for you, it helps you, but pretty clearly they get to a point where it's pretty clear they'd rather be doing something else, but they can't. And that's kind of the sad story of that. Heidi Robinson. Is it wrong for me to look at the Scientology cross and find it beautiful to look at and unique? It's one of the many things about Scientology that got me wanting to join Scientology in the first place. Also, is it wrong of me to attend and enjoy free Scientology events that are open to the public, even though I have no interest in joining? When will Scientology finally be completely shut down worldwide and no longer recognized as a religion? All right. Thank you very much for this question. So first off, let me just say you're free to do whatever you want, and I don't have any real opinion one way or the other as to whether you should or shouldn't like the Scientology cross or want to go to Scientology events if they're fun or open to the public or something you think you'd like to do. Go right ahead. But I think that it is important to be fully informed about those decisions and what it is that you're actually looking at or actually taking part in or supporting. And with this, let me address two things. First, you mentioned the Scientology cross. It's an 8-pointed cross. It is quite aesthetic, but it is not unique to Scientology. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard took it from earlier occult practices, specifically, and I looked this up here, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, this is something Hubbard loved. In fact, Golden Dawn was a phrase he ripped off and used for Scientology in the mid 1950s. When he was introducing Scientology as a religious subject to the citizens of Phoenix, Arizona. And he gave a series of lectures, which are now released and called the lectures or the Golden Dawn lectures. And no one in Scientology really seems to understand that is connected directly back to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or more commonly, the Golden Dawn. It was a secret society devoted to the study and practice of the occult, metaphysics, and paranormal activities during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That is what the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is. And that cross, which I'm going to show you on the screen here, they had what's called the Rosy cross. And you see it's an 8-pointed cross put together exactly like the Scientology cross. It's just that the Scientology one doesn't have all those inner symbols and pentagrams and other symbology in the middle of it. Hubbard took that out, but he kept the overall symbol itself. And you can look this symbol up on Wikipedia. There's an awful lot about this. It goes to Rosicrucianism, but it also has this other beginning with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The only reason I bring that up is to show you a direct tie, a symbolic tie, and there are many of these in Scientology, go right back to the occult practices that Scientology is actually based in. Aleister Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, the Rosicrucianists, the Golden Dawn. There's so much stuff mixed up in this. There's tomes of just writings that go on for thousands of pages that Hubbard was drawing from that are the actual origin story of Scientology. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. You can look it up and do your own research on that as far as what these symbols stand for. It's not all blood magic and sex rituals, but on the other hand, blood magic and sex rituals are mixed up in this. So when you look at this beautiful so-called Scientology cross, realize that you are not looking at something unique to Scientology at all. You're looking at a camouflage symbol that is used openly and brazenly in Scientology so that Hubbard could fool his followers into practicing the occult. It sounds nuts. I did not believe this at all for years after I got into Scientology, that there was such a direct link to the occult. But there is. It's right there. And this symbol is one of the proofs of that. Now, you also asked about attending Scientology events. And of course, there's nothing wrong with attending a Scientology event. They're not going to brainwash you, and they're not going to, get you in their clutches and steal your credit cards all on day one. But there's a lot of free, fun events to do all over town that don't have anything to do with Scientology's corrupt intent and avarice and greed. And by avarice and greed, I mean that the only reason, see, we got to be clear about a few things with Scientology. And one of them is that it is, at its heart, a money-making scam with nothing but deception and smoke and mirrors connected with every single part of it. Those free public events that you go to for that Scientology puts on have only one intention: to get you to become a Scientologist. And the Scientologists who go to these have quotas of new Scientologists they're supposed to get, books they're supposed to sell, films or showings they're supposed to make happen. Like whatever they can do to pull you in, to turn you into a Scientologist, that's the only reason those events are put on. It's not about community outreach. It's not about getting along better with the neighbors. It's not about doing something for the community. It's never about those things when it comes to Scientology. It is about those things with other groups, other religions. I know Catholic groups, Christian groups, Jewish groups, even Islamic groups that truly want to get along better in the community, to contribute, to give as well as get. That is not the case with Scientology. They are 100% gimme, 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 and I'm going to say whatever words or show you whatever imagery or dress up however I need to get you to lower your guard so that I can impinge on you and teach you the truth and get you to be part of this group. That's all they're doing there. So you're gonna just need to know that. That's all. So that you can go and enjoy yourself, I suppose, and not get, sucked in by their chicanery, their foolery, right? Their nonsense. And that's all I really wanted to say on that is, yeah, feel free to do whatever you want. Just have your eyes wide open in going in there, because you are walking into a little bit of a lion's den when you walk into or around a Church of Scientology, simply by the nature of the practice. I am not speaking to any one individual Scientologist's intentions, because some Scientologists individually have very good intentions and they want to get along better with the community. They want to get along better with people. They want to just help people out. It's not all about the money and all that. But you cannot ever count on running into that Scientologist, because by far more of them, way, way more of them, are only interested in your money or only interested in your membership and your work and what you can give to them. So, yeah, sure, you'll run into some very nice, truly nice people in Scientology, but you're going to run into a lot more people who are only being nice because they're trying to deceive you for their own ends. That's how it is there. So, something to think about. There you go, Heidi. Taffy Sinclair. Is word clearing a bad thing? I tend to think it's harmless. I mean, looking up words you don't know or fully understand can't be bad, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Hey, Taffy. No, of course you're not wrong. There is absolutely nothing at all wrong with looking up words in a dictionary. I've got no problem with looking up some word you might understand, half understand, totally don't understand, maybe understand, except for this one little nuance. Go for it. That's what dictionaries are for. I love dictionaries. I'm very, very familiar with them. And they are great resources, and they are written for a reason. And I want people to use them more, because there isn't any other way to gain literacy than to dive into a dictionary. Now, I mean, if you really want to understand the nuance of language and the terminology and symbols that we use, a dictionary is an invaluable resource for that. So where does it go off the rails? Very, very easy. This is a very easy distinction to make, because, when you're using a dictionary for purposes of education, enlightenment, understanding, all day long, go for it. Do whatever you want. When you are using a dictionary to abusively enforce a dogma on somebody, when I have a question about something in that an author like L. Ron Hubbard has written in one of his books, and the answer that I am told, and the only answer I am given, and the only explanation, and the only response is, you don't understand this material, and that's why you're asking this question. And you have a misunderstood word, and that's the only reason you're falling asleep reading this material. And you have a misunderstood word, and that's the only reason you're trying to leave the classroom right now. And you have a misunderstood word, and that's the only reason you disagree with something L. Ron Hubbard wrote. When those are the reasons I have to crack open a dictionary, we have a problem. Because misunderstood words are not the only reason for any of those things I just laid out to you. You should be able to and be free to disagree with any idea anybody ever tells you. You have that freedom. You have that right to disagree. And just because you disagree doesn't automatically mean that you don't understand the point you're disagreeing with. It might well be that you disagree with something because you don't understand it. And maybe understanding would mean that you would change your mind and agree with it. We certainly have tons and tons of ignorance in the world that drives an awful lot of our disagreements. But that is not 100% uniformly true, that just because you disagree with something, you don't understand it. But that's not the case in a Scientology classroom. If you are studying L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology classrooms and you say, hey, Hubbard says here that the universe is, 4 quadrillion years old. That's bullshit. I don't agree with that. What word did you not understand? Is the response you're going to get. It doesn't have anything to do with not understanding the words. You understand them quite well, and you know that they are bullshit. So that's the point where I go, hey, now you're using a dictionary. Now you're using this misunderstood word idea to engage in a kind of thought reform, a kind of brainwashing, a kind of mind control. Because now it's like you're not okay. It's not okay that you have that disagreement. It's not right. It's morally wrong. It is incorrect for you to sit there and spout your disagreements about what L. Ron Hubbard writes. And the punishment for that is open up your dictionary and find what words on that page you don't understand that are causing you to have that disagreement, that problem, that upset, that sleepy feeling, etc. Okay? And L. Ron Hubbard assigns a great many phenomena to misunderstood words. He says if you're reading and you go blank, you don't understand, you disagree, you have an upset, you don't want to continue studying, the only reason for any of that is a misunderstood word. And that is just bullshit. That's total nonsense. There are lots and lots of reasons why a person could become sleepy while they're reading, could disagree, could want to leave, could become upset with the material that have nothing to do with misunderstood words. That's where the line gets drawn in the sand for me, right? Is if it's if it's your own choice, your own options, your own volition, go for it. If somebody is enforcing loaded language on you, or this kind of thought reform sort of approach where they're going to change your mind forcibly by making you do something that you don't want to do, that's a whole other problem, right? Or not only that you don't want to do it, but it's just the wrong solution to the problem. You're not tired because of a misunderstood word. You're not wanting to leave because of a misunderstood word. So trying to force that down your throat, you get the idea. So there you go. John O. Nolan. How did you find the job you did? Property management, I believe, when you came out of the church. Did all those years working in the Sea Org give you a lot of transferable skills, making the adjustment smooth? Does working in the Sea Org for many years give you an incredible work ethic where you're able to just get about any kind of job done in the real world of work? And do you find the hours worked in the real world, which is nothing compared to the Sea Org, make work in the real world a piece of cake? Did you put down your Sea Org experience on your resume? How did your employers regard it? Damn, Jono, like 1 or 2 questions. Okay. Just kidding. Okay, so you're asking all about the Sea Org work ethic and all that. Now, look, let me just clarify or say a few things about all this. Um, the Sea Org work ethic is not a good thing. Okay, it's not a benefit. It is a bug. It is not a feature that a person comes out of the Sea Org so hepped up and so ready to work that they're basically ready to become a slave to anybody who tells them what to do. And that's kind of what happens with people who are initially coming out of the Sea Org. Is it's the same kind of mentality that a person would have after coming out of a forced labor camp or a slave condition or something like that, a trafficking situation. I mean, because that is what the Sea Org is. It is a labor trafficking organization. Let's be clear about that. So you have people who are in a mindset where they are obsessive. They're OCD about work, and I don't mean that from a diagnostic point of view. I'm just using the term to get. They're obsessive. They can't think about or do much of anything else except work all the time, because that's the lifestyle that they have been, kind of brainwashed into. That you are not useful, you are not valuable in any way if you are not working as hard as you possibly can. It's the Tom Cruise quote from the turtleneck video that he did years ago, taken to the extreme, which is that if your head hits the pillow, when your head hits the pillow at night, you better know that you've done everything you can possibly do for this movement, this cause, this organization. And if not, how dare you go to bed? How dare you, right? It's that kind of approach. It's awful. It's a slave master kind of mentality that is enforced on all the workers in the Sea Org. And they, go along with it for all the various reasons. So that's a bad thing. So I just want to make sure I'm framing this correctly right from the get-go, is that it took me years to recover from that point of view, from that obsessive work ethic. So I want to put that there first. Okay, they take it way too far. All right. That all being said, I got a job in property management because the people who hired me for that job were impressed by the work that I had done for another person I was working for at the time that they observed. I was working for a woman who did mosaic tile work, and I was doing office work for her. And her landlords owned the building that her company was in, along with a ton of other places, obviously. And this was all kind of an artistic bent. And this was back in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. I oversaw some renovations work for the woman I was working for. She needed some renovations done, and I worked with her on that. And in the process, I was the liaison with the landlords. And so when she, about a month or two after that, had to let me go for reasons I don't know, but I believe it was pressure from the church, they hired me. They saw that what the work I was able to do, and then they were impressed by that. So they hired me for their own ends. And then I ended up working for the property manager for that entire building. Does the Sea Org give you a lot of transferable skills? Yes, it does. There's a lot of things you can do in the Sea Org that will transfer directly into the real world. There's across a wide spectrum of job types, from janitorial, cooking, admin, engineering, electrical. I mean, all of it's there. So all of it translates in one way or another into the real world. And in fact, I now recommend, if you are an ex-Sea Org member or ex-Scientology staff member and you want to communicate your skill set in a resume, do a skills-based resume, not a job history-based resume, where you highlight the skill set that you're bringing, because there are an awful lot of transferable skills from Scientology and the Sea Org into the real world. Yes, it gives you an incredible work ethic, but here's the thing. You ask me, Jono, where you're able to just about get any kind of job done in the real world. Okay, no, I can't go do underwater welding. I can't go do any kind of electrical work or trades work really at any kind of pro level. I was winging it the entire time I was in the Sea Org. I do have skills in a mill. I can go cut stuff and make stuff and produce things. I've built cabinetry and woodworking and stuff like that. I can do that kind of carpentry work, but not at a professional level, not even remotely close to a professional level, right? I took orders and I executed them, and I learned a few things along the way, but that doesn't mean I now know what I'm doing when it comes to a wide array of things. I did tarring and roofing work. I did painting work. I did construction work. I did a lot of physical labor work when I was on the RPF and at various times in the Sea Org. But none of that transfers over to a job site where I would feel in any way confident in saying I know how to do a trade. You know, I can do some fix up and clean up and stuff like that around the house, and I'm quite happy to do that. But that doesn't transfer to a professional job in any, at all. There were people in the Sea Org who were at a pro level on some of that kind of work, though. That's why I say for some people it transfers out. But what I wanted to address there is just because I had a strong obsessive work ethic doesn't mean that that translates to me being able to do any kind of job anywhere at any time. That's what I wanted to stress about that. I hope that's clear. As far as the work hours, when I first got out of the Sea Org, I was so obsessive about work that I wanted to work all the time. And it was a little weird to only have an 8-hour workday. It was like, wow, what do I do with myself? So that was definitely part of the adjustment. But that was, again, a feature, not a bug. I needed to calm down, wind down, learn how to relax. And I had to practice doing that. I was so obsessive about work that play and rest was a guilty pleasure. It was something I literally felt guilty about engaging in. And that was for years that took to overcome that. Many, many years, well over 5. Before I was really able to chill out and not be guilty about it. Okay. And as far as did I put my Sea Org experience on my resume? No, because I didn't get jobs through resumes initially when I was first working. And so that's what I can say about that. So I don't know. Hope that all helps and it's informative. So there you go. DK. If someone joins an independent Scientology group, i.e. a squirrel group, what do they do for books? Do they still buy the books from the Church of Scientology? How will the CSing happen? Do they ask for the PC's folder? Would they even be able to get them? What type of an e-meter do they use? Do independent groups have a community? Do they have a library of materials from the pre-Miscavige changes? Do they have their own version of standard tech? Okay, introduction to the independent Scientology movement as told by somebody who has never been in the independent Scientology movement. I have only observed it from a distance. And I have, of course, spoken with independent Scientologists, and I've read widely about, from their blogs and their work and stuff. And that's why I know something about them and I can talk about this. But you're going to find that there are a lot of different answers to the questions you've asked me here, DK, depending on which independent Scientologist or Scientology group you're talking to, because they're all different. They all have different flavors of Scientology based entirely on what those individual practitioners of Scientology think is valid or invalid from Hubbard's work. None of them use everything Hubbard wrote, because if they did, they would cease to exist, because Hubbard was crystal clear over and over again that you either do official, dogmatic Scientology according to the official church, or you're a squirrel, you're a scumbag, you are a suppressive person. And L. Ron Hubbard, personally, would have declared and tried to ruin every single one of those independent Scientologists. Every one of them he would have tried to destroy if he had the option to do so. So every one of them are operating without acknowledging that to one degree or another. Okay, that being said, they pick and choose. They cherry pick what parts of Scientology they want to apply. And, at the end of the day, there isn't particularly anything wrong with that, because what's going on in the official Church of Scientology is truly horrifying. It's awful. It's abusive psychologically and physically, and it is actually bad for you. So the independent Scientologists are doing some shadow version of what's going on in the official church, but they've toned it down for the most part. Usually they tone down the heavy ethics and justice actions and the physical discipline. They kind of take all that stuff away, and they try to just practice straight auditing techniques as best as they know how. The books that they use are, either bought from the church, bought on eBay, kept from their own time when they were in the church. Because remember, Scientologists are expected to buy a complete and total library of all of L. Ron Hubbard's books and lectures and e-meters. So they've got all their own stuff, or they have digital copies and versions of it. And various groups have tried over the years to standardize their bulletins and their policies and their issues the same way that the church has. And they run into all the same levels of disagreements and problems that you would expect when you try to produce a standardized, uniform version of something, and you run into individuals who, by their nature as independent Scientologists, are like, this isn't right. I'm not following this. I'm doing this. Right? And there's no real system or framework for them to enforce a standardized version of what they're doing. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, because you take out all the worst parts of Scientology. Well, what are the worst parts of Scientology? The parts that make you comply with Scientology, right? The ethics, the Office of Special Affairs, all that crap that they, all that heavy-duty pressure they bring to bear. That's all a compliance machine. Those are all mechanisms of getting you to comply with what the church wants you to do. So independent Scientologists kind of take that out of the mix, and that's why they have so much trouble and lack of uniformity and lack of discipline in what they're doing, which is fine. I'm just contrasting the two things. You see, I'm not making a value judgment about it. It's just kind of funny that the reason that the independent field is so wildly variable is because they've removed those compliance mechanisms. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Yes, they have a community. They do conventions. They do meetups. They have groups. They have various activities. So yes, there is a community, but it is not a uniform, homogenous community. It's lots of disparate ones. I know there's a community in Russia. There's whatever's going on here in the U.S. in the different parts and areas. I know the Great Plains has some independent organization set up that's different from the independent guys out in California, different from the independent guys down in Florida, etc. Right? And yes, they do have a library of materials that are pre-Miscavige. And some of them swear by that. Other ones, not so much. It all depends on their own time when they were in Scientology. But a lot of the OG independents, the old school guys, they have whole websites that have all the old original material. And they will swear by it and say, anything after 1973 or anything after 1980 is bad, or anything after Hubbard died is bad, or, they've all got their different flavors and versions of what they find acceptable in terms of L. Ron Hubbard's materials. And yeah, so that of course gives them their own versions of standard tech. And there you go. Hope that was illuminating for you there. All right, let's do some flash answers. Kelly G. I know Scientology doesn't do a lot of celebrations of individual Sea Org members, like the birth of a baby, college graduation, etc. Are there other celebrations, such as marriage receptions, 10-year anniversary in the Sea Org, reaching clear? For individual Sea Org members, you do get a birthday party, of course, and generally the group that they're part of will do a little birthday thing on their day, unless they're in an awful lot of trouble. Then maybe they only hear from their spouse or a close friend or something on their birthday. There is, in terms of other things, there is Sea Org Day. That is in September. That is the anniversary of the Sea Org, and they have rank and rating promotions on that day. And there tend to be longevity acknowledgments and things like that for individuals. So that's kind of a thing. Otherwise, the only other real individual acknowledgement that occurs in the Sea Org on a regular basis is the Christmas bonus. There is supposed to be a financial bonus that you get around Christmas time. Generally speaking, they've managed how to weasel out of it to a great degree because they make insane production demands and stuff like that. But you'll usually get something around Christmas. So those are the things that come to mind. Shimoda Tala. You wake up tomorrow and find yourself ruler of the entire world somehow. What's the first thing you do? I'm going to Disneyland. I'm just kidding. First thing I would do is actually get climate change under control as best it could be gotten under control at this point by gathering the summit of world leaders and scientists and just kind of putting everybody together in a building and not letting anybody leave until we've actually got some solutions figured out and everybody's on the same page on it. If I were ruler of the world and people were actually going to listen to me and have to comply with what I said, then that's the first thing I would do, is I would absolutely positively put some kind of future for our species together so that we have a future and that there would be vast work done to educate the public in general in ways that they would be willing to listen to. And that would be individual by area because different people listen to different things. But I would put something together and demand that the leaders put something together that will be listened to by the citizenry so that everybody really does kind of move toward a united front against this problem. Because as far as I can tell, the reason I answer this question in a little bit of seriousness this way is because as far as I can tell, that is the one and only truly species-ending existential threat we actually face. And I don't see anybody on this entire planet taking it seriously enough from the point of view of the world leaders. So that's my answer. CT, I was thinking tonight about your critical picture movie reviews you did in the past, and my thoughts then moved over to music. I love all kinds of music, and you and I are approximately the same age, give or take a year. I was just curious about what you would consider your top 5 favorite bands, musicians, musical acts. Are there any new artists that interest you at all? All right, well, I am uniquely American, and I grew up in the 80s, 70s and 80s. And so it is really hard for me to narrow down the top 5 music or bands or artists that I like or follow or listen to, because I am very eclectic in my music tastes, and it really is all over the place. I know everybody hates me when I say I don't like jazz. Too bad. I don't like jazz, and I'm not really big on opera, and I'm not really big on like thrash metal or death metal. But other than that, I can find something I like in almost any genre outside of that. And of course, there's, tons and tons of satirical stuff too. Where do you categorize Weird Al? Stuff like that. But as far as top 5 go, I put together a little list, but it's really kind of nonsense because, there's immediately I start thinking of other groups and bands and things that should be in the top 5 that I can't fit into the top 5, right? So what do I do? All right, but here's what I've got for you. My favorite band ever is Rush. They never get old. Especially for me, 80s era, the prog rock phase of Rush for me was really my time with them, right? Tom Sawyer, Witch Hunt from the Moving Pictures album, Power Windows, et cetera. I mean, they're just so many good albums and songs from that time period. Sting / the Police, but mostly Sting, because the elements of the Police that I like the most are the elements that Sting brought to it. I believe he's a genius songwriter, and that's what I really appreciate about him is the songwriting capability. He's really good with language. I pay attention to lyrics. I'm one of those guys. And Sting has always been on my radar for that since junior high school. Same with Billy Joel. I think he's one of the greatest songwriters who's ever lived. And so for that reason, I've got him up there. Even though I'm not listening to Billy Joel every other day, I just, the guy's songwriting capabilities are just out the roof. Same with Paul Simon, by the way. Very hard for me not to, I go Billy Joel, Paul Simon, and then I put Sting in there, and then I also put Don Henley. They're all kind of on the same line for me, and in terms of quality of work, just blown away by their ability to put words and music together. Of course, Don Henley includes the Eagles, so you're going to bring them into the picture. And then finally, the Beatles, because of the tremendous impact and influence on everybody ever since then. I mean, I don't think that there's such a thing as music that is uninfluenced by the Beatles in some fashion at this point. Certainly in popular music genres, what can be said about the Beatles that hasn't already been said? So those are where my mind goes when I start thinking top 5-ish type things. But then, I leave off, Elton John, Fleetwood Mac. I mean, Led Zeppelin, The Who, the Aerosmith. I mean, there's so much music. And that's just from the little time period when I'm around and learning to appreciate music and my teenage years and all that, when we really established our music roots. That's, those are the things that come to mind. But there's just such a wide array that that's all I'll say. For a flash answer, this is a real long one, so there you go. All right, that was our show this week. I hope you found it entertaining, informative, and educational, and I hope that through PayPal or Patreon or whatever, Venmo, the links are all below. You can support the channel, support what I'm doing. I very much could use it, and I think that the quality of content being put out here is worth your support. So if you agree, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, keep watching. The content will always be free here. All right, that being said, I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.